Are you self-aware?
I learned an interesting fact the other day that 80% of the population is, in fact, actually not self-aware.
I've seen so many people on TikTok who recently learned this fact. And I'm gonna call BS. Here's why. So, where did this fact come from? Insert my usual PSA that if you don't cite your sources, we can't ever really know where the fact came from. We just have to guess. So here's my educated guess. There's a book, there's a Harvard Business Review article, there's some other articles, but they all roads lead to this person who's an organizational psychologist, Tasha Urich. I'm so sorry if I'm saying the name wrong. It's their body of work that this fact seems to come from. So this is the Forbes article on this study, this research. It says, in a series of surveys, they found that 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only 10 to 15% truly are. Let's do a little mathy math. 95 minus 15 is 80. And if you're thinking like, wow, that's kind of like a lot of work to get to the 80% that went viral, I'm inclined to agree with you. But there was also this podcast interview with the researcher where she says, our data reveals that 95% of people believe they're self-aware, but the real number is 12 to 15%. That means on a good day, about 80% of people are lying about themselves to themselves. So my hunch is more likely the 80% came from this podcast episode that happened. It's leaderchat.org. It was 5 years ago. If not the podcast, maybe it's in the book. I haven't bought it. I haven't read it. I don't know. But you see, like the 80% was mentioned like kind of casually, doing some math on this 95% and then this like 10 to 15% or 12 to 15%, depending on where you're reading the stat. Because if you're reading it in the cut, which also picked up this research, it's the same quote from the researcher. On a good day, 80% of us are lying to ourselves about whether we're lying to ourselves. So is it true? Is it true? Is it a fact that 80% of people are not actually self-aware? I mean, personally, this statement rings a little cavalier to me. Like, that doesn't sound like a researcher telling you a fact about something that they found. That's my personal opinion, right? But let's take a look at the dang research. I mean, well, you can't really. Like, you can look at this Harvard Business Review article where they say, we are currently writing up our results for submission to an academic journal. If you pop over to Google Scholar, which is my favorite place to look for if an academic publication has come out, you see that just the book is listed. If you click to see redundant, omitted results, it's still like just the book. Like, the research article has not come out yet. Which, like, no shade, research articles can take the peer review process, a whole other thing, can take a really long time, can be severely delayed. But, like, we can't actually look at the research because it's not out there for us to look at it. There's just these articles about it. Or to be fair, the book, which I don't have, so, like, the research is, like, gate-kept a little bit. If you look at the Harvard Business Review article, it does have a little, like, you can push to read more about the research. And so it talks about the type of research that they did, that led to this 80% number, right? So they looked at existing scientific studies, which is primarily to understand, like, how people are defining self-awareness. They surveyed thousands of people to explore the relationship between self-awareness and other outcomes, so like satisfaction, happiness, stress. They developed an assessment to measure self-awareness because they didn't feel like any of the tools out there were doing a really good job. They did in-depth interviews with 50 people who had dramatically improved their self-awareness, and like they give some criteria for that. And then lastly, like right at the bottom here, they did surveys about employers and employees to learn more about self-awareness and the relationship to like job-related things like attitude, commitment, effectiveness. So that sounds like a lot of really interesting, valuable contributions on self-awareness. And yet, none of those bullets that I just read make me think that research is going to lead to the stat that 80% of people aren't actually self-aware. We don't know much about the sample. We know that there were like a series of surveys. There's just like not enough info on what was done and like how we got to that finding. That is something that I really love about peer-reviewed research, is that when this does get peer-reviewed, if that is a key finding that's presented, it will have to be explained, like where that number came from, and it'll be really clear, and it'll, like, having all of that background information on the number will allow people to make a decision about whether or not they think it's true that 80% of people are not self-aware. But like this idea that most people believe they're self-aware but actually aren't, personally, I'm not seeing any facts, compelling evidence presented in these articles that would make me buy into that statistic, or candidly even understand where that statistic came from. So is the answer in the book? Maybe all of the glorious research that leads up to this finding that 80% of people are just walking around thinking they're self-aware and really aren't, maybe that is all in the book. And if that's so, the issue is that like that should just be easily accessible to anyone. Like when you're putting these facts and stats out there, I should be able to know exactly where it came from. I shouldn't have to pay $19.99 or however much the book costs to like get the information to figure out if something seems true or like based on rigorous research or applicable to me based on the sample, the people that you conducted the research on. I see a lot of people talking about media literacy and like social media literacy. And again, like I echo everything they say. This is like why it's so important. And it's especially irritating to me to see publications like The Cut, like Forbes, like Harvard Business Review, who people might just like on face value take those as like legitimate co-signing, saying like, yeah, this is true. Not even they are presenting these details of where these facts came from. Like for every single freaking fact that you read, I think you should be able to know like instantly without like going down some rabbit hole of searching. You should be able to know when was the research conducted, where was it conducted, done, who did the research, what like survey questions they ask, you know, like what type of data was it. You should be able to know the people or like the qualities of the data points, right? Like you want to know the ages, you want to know maybe the gender, the race, ethnicity, maybe you want to know the professions people had, right? Like you want to know about the sample. And I say like data points because it's not necessarily people, like it could be a study of organizations or it could be a study of dogs, like, right? But you want the details so that you can better understand like, hey, where did this data come from? Like you should just be able to quickly and easily access and know that for every single stat out there. And that starts with people citing their sources. Like when you find a cool thing that you want to share, like you should check to see if it's true first, but also when you share it, you should say where it came from, right? And like that's on the people sharing the information. And then on the people producing information, gosh dang, you have to clearly put all that info out there. And if you're reporting it, like in a reporter write-up situation, like it's on you to take the information the researcher provided it and share it with the broader audience that you are seeking to communicate with. It's just really like this state of like data and statistics and research in the world right now. It's a freaking hot mess, y'all. It's a hot mess, and I